Suzanne, Article 50, it allows for only 2 years. We have to settle the terms of a divorce. That's going to be complicated. We have to agree a new relationship with the EU. That's going to be even more complicated. Can that really be done in 2 years?
Well, this is the worry I've always had. I think Article 50 was probably written with the intention that it was never going to be used. I often wondered where this 2-year period actually came from, because as anyone who's been through a divorce knows, it can take a heck of a lot longer than that. So I think, though, I suppose it does put the pressure on, doesn't it, to try and get everything sorted as quickly as possible. And surely that's got to be in our best interest and the EU's best interest. Right.
But, I mean, the timetable is even tougher than 2 years, John. Because Mr. Barnier, heading up the EU negotiations, he wants the deal to be agreed by October 2018, because he wants to allow time, another 6 months, for the 27 governments to ratify. Now, let me just point out that no real negotiations will start till the German elections are out of the way, and that's not until October. They're on the last Sunday of September. All of that cannot be done in a year.
I completely agree, and we know as well that they can't even agree how they're going to negotiate, because Mrs. Merkel has said now is not the time to the Prime Minister when she said we want to do simultaneous negotiations, we want the divorce and the new settlement. And what she said is you've got to have the divorce first before we start to talk about the terms. How can they possibly do that in the amount of time that they're setting aside? And
you couldn't possibly have a second referendum as a result, because that's your timetable, October 2018.
Well, you know what the Prime Minister has said.
No, I know what Nicola Sturgeon said.
And what Nicola Sturgeon has said as well. Well, at some level, we've got to take the Prime Minister at her word, haven't we? She has said, and David Davis has said, that they're aiming for this timetable. I certainly think that we'll have a sense of what the deal is likely to be in 18 months.
You couldn't have a second referendum on the basis of a sense.
No.
Well,
definitely not.
At the moment, we're having to argue to have the second referendum, so we've not quite got to that stage yet. But I think we will have a sense, because so far the Prime Minister's refused to say what the British hand is. Now, once the negotiations start, those 27 members are going to leak like a sieve. We're going to know what the British position is.
So you're not going to have a referendum on the basis of leaks?
It's nonsense.
We've already had one referendum where we didn't really know what the alternative is. We don't want another one.
Don't you remember Dennis Healy's first law of holes? When you're in one, stop digging.
We want to have the referendum. We don't know what the date is going to be. Right. But of course, the one thing I would say, Andrew, is when the 27 member states have their ratification process, that has to be the time, surely, that the Scots are also allowed to have a say. Because how can the 27 be allowed to have a say and Scotland not?
Because you're part of the United Kingdom.
Of course we're part of the United Kingdom, we know that, but it goes against all sense of natural justice.
Let me come back. Isn't some, when you look at particularly when you see in the context that we've got a French elections first of all. So the Council of Ministers meeting at the end of April, it's Francois Hollande is going there. He's irrelevant to it. It could take quite a while to form a new French government this summer. If it's Macron or Le Pen, neither will have a big presence in the French Assembly. Then you go into the summer and you come out and you're into the German elections. Isn't some kind of transitional period almost inevitable?
That may be, although I don't think the sort of political decision that has to be made is all that complicated. I mean, as I said earlier, you know, it's either kind of acrimonious or it's fairly harmonious, and those are the dials that are set by the politicians. I agree that the negotiations between officials could be very complex and they could go off into a transitional period, but the political decisions can really be taken once the German elections are over. I don't think it will be taken then. I think it will only be taken at the 59th minute of the 11th hour, because that, again...
You mean in March 2019?
Yes, that again is, EU tradition, that everything is left till the last possible moment. But it's those two politicians who matter.
But it's quite hard, even if it's harmonious, even if there's goodwill on all sides to get the divorce deal done, get our new relationship with the EU done. A year? 18 months?
I personally don't think it will be possible. And part of me gets a sense that the public just wants a bit more honesty and realism in this debate about how long it will take and the trade-offs and difficult decisions that will inevitably be required. I think the French election would obviously have a big difference whether Macron or Le Pen wins.
Well, if Madame Le Pen wins, that's an existential threat to the EU, and Brexit becomes a sideshow.
Exactly. But I'm not sure that too much of a difference, whether it's Schulz or Merkel. I think Merkel might be more pragmatic. Schulz is more hardline.
Well, he's more anti-British.
And more concerned about sorting out the internal problems of the Eurozone. So,
let me ask you this. Should we be prepared to pay a multi-billion-pound divorce fee?
I don't think so, no. I think if you look at the amount of money we put in since we joined the European Union, over 500 billion. We've got 9 billion invested in the European Investment Bank. Our money has
That's the gross figure, the 500
It is, that's right, yes, absolutely. The money that we have invested in the European Union has enabled it to build massive, great big buildings, huge property portfolio, infrastructure. I don't think we should be paying a big bill.
Do you, John?
You know, we've signed up for a set of rules. We don't know what the figure is. I watched your interview with the Prime Minister. She didn't give you many straight answers, and she certainly didn't answer that one, except to the extent that she said this is a law-abiding country and we have to stick by the rules that we signed up.
But she didn't deny that it could be a multi-billion-pound settlement.
She didn't confirm the figure you put on it. She wasn't prepared to confirm. But of course, a lot of this is you know, pensions that we've guaranteed. You know, it's a complicated
It's not just that, it's we've committed as part of the other countries to long-term budgets, to investment in other countries, and I think...
But why would we be committed to anything beyond the current budget of 2020? That's what we put the money... I can see there be an argument that we need to commit.
That's the difference
why anything
between around the 30 billion and above. That's the difference, I think, between some of the figures. We don't know what they are, but I think that we should pay what we owe. I've always believed... Do
you remember anybody being told about this during the referendum campaign?
No, I don't.
Well, there's an argument
but I don't
about
remember Remain or Leave bringing this. No. I don't remember the Remain people saying... I certainly don't remember the Leave people ever confronting the idea of a bill to leave, but I don't even remember the Remain people trying to frighten the electorate with the prospect of a bill. This all came up there. Is it not politically very difficult for the British government to agree to a substantial one-off payment?
I think it is politically rather difficult, but that doesn't mean that it won't happen. I was rather surprised that the Prime Minister didn't say to you yesterday that she had seen no case made for the 50 billion. That would have kept,
so was I.
That would have kept all her options open because the case might subsequently be made. I think looking at this positively, it's a pretty good sign that the European Union is worried about what it's going to do without British money.
Yes.
Well, that's a very important point, because money has become more important than the coverage in this country suggests for the European Union. We are one of the few net donors. We are the biggest after Germany, and so many of France only contributes half what we do because it gets it all back through the common agricultural policy. There is a huge hole in their budget. Now, if you owe me money, I'm in the driving seat.
Well, that was a very clear message from this visit to Berlin last week. They are very focused on the divorce agreement. One was that. Secondly, that they need to sort out problems that they have within the EU. But the third thing, which we never talk about, is Brexit isn't top of their list of priorities. This is not what they want to be talking about. The world does not revolve round us.
What is top?
They have the Eurozone and security and migration.
But what do they want to do with the Eurozone?
Which is precisely why we're leaving, because those issues are such top priorities. That's why people voted to leave.
It has been a spur to the rest of
But
Europe.
what do they want to do with the Euro? Now that we're no longer there to be a brake on everything, what do they want to do with it?
Well, there's clearly a desire to sort out the problems as best they can in Italy and in Greece.
But what do they want to do? They don't want.
They don't have that.
There's no. I mean, the one way to sort out, one of the ways essential to sorting out the euro, is to agree transfer payments from the north to the south. There is no agreement on that in the European Union at all.
Andrew, a lot of them are in denial about Brexit. I was in Berlin last week.
In denial.
As well, and what a lot of them say, a lot of the senior politicians you speak to say, is it really going to happen? And of course, to some extent, this informs the way that they'll conduct themselves in the Brexit negotiations, because if they think that Britain will get such a terrible deal that the British people will rebel against it,
I didn't
that
get
the Prime
any
Minister...
sense of that, John.
Really?
I got no sense whatsoever. They know it's going to happen. Their priorities on the divorce agreement. We had no... The idea that they were thinking about a future trade deal, it wasn't there.
And also, they're all of them are
we
very...
misunderstand where they're coming from.
Well, I need to bring Suzanne Evans.
What I found when I was...
But of course, if they give us a terrible deal, the British public mood could switch the other way. It could get very angry.
Well,
but
that's what some of my Brexit Tory colleagues argued.
We just don't know.
This could backfire. We don't.
But would you? I get the impression UKIP would quite like us to have no deal.
No, I don't think that's true. That's certainly not what I feel. Of course, it's much better to have a deal. What we have said, though, is if we don't get a deal which involves taking back control of our borders, taking back control of our fishing grounds, taking back control of our laws, then we don't get the deal that the British people voted for. So that's where we would say no deal is better.
Right, but isn't that what Mrs May is going to try and do?
Yes, it is.
I mean, was there anything that she said yesterday you disagreed with?
No, and, I saw David Davis on Monday night, and I said, we voted how we voted, and it's up to you to deliver. And we'll obviously be watching what they do, but of course we want a good deal.
It is an enormous challenge, though, Michael, is it not? I mean, it's almost daunting.
No, it is daunting. I don't know whether the government has the capacity to deal with this, to get through all the decisions that have to be made, at the same time as it's meant to be, governing the country in all sorts of other ways. So that is a worry. I mean, those of us who favour Brexit do not argue that it's going to be a bed of roses. It is not.
One final thing, John. Has Miss Sturgeon misread the Scottish mood with this second referendum? There's very little appetite for a second referendum before Brexit. And this poll came out by John Curtis, the doyen of pollsters, based at Strathclyde University. 62% of Scots want the same Brexit deal as the rest of the UK. 64% want the same immigration rules for EU and non-EU members.
I hear my doubts about that.
You're not allowed to doubt, John.
I have to say, well, we've all had experiences of polls, haven't we? Sometimes.
Yeah, but this is pretty dramatic.
I don't buy that, I have to say.
Really?
No, I don't think so. And we've now moved into a new stage, because this is no longer the SNP asking for a second independence referendum.
This is a new poll.
It's the Scottish Parliament.
This is a new poll.
Andrew, it's a parliamentary democracy.
Exactly.
It won a majority of backing in the Parliament.
This is not a parliamentary democracy. We've run out of time, so I have to shut you all up. But I thank you both for being with us tonight.
You didn't, frankly, have the balls to put country before party.